when you put a fun witch in a Dunwich, which Dunwich did the fun witch done? If that sounds confusing, don't worry, we're going to straighten you out. I got you covered. It's going to be okay. But we had fun. So we're going to talk about Elvira meets H.P. Lovecraft #2 from Dynamite Comics. See you in 3. And welcome back to Comical Opinions. This is our review of Elvira meets H.P. Lovecraft #2 from Dynamite Comics. And in this issue, Elvira and the ghost of H.P. Lovecraft head to Mistkatonic University for the real Necronomicon, but they find a particular horror, which I've already teased, waiting for them. But before we get started, please like, share, comment, subscribe, hit that bell for notification. Your attention is greatly appreciated, and make sure you stay tuned to the end for the final score. Let's talk about the credits. This is written by David Avalone. I think it's Avalone. David, if you hear this, I apologize. I think it's Avalone. Art by Cuba Bale. Colors by Walter Pereira. Letters by Taylor Esposito. And the main cover, cover A, is done by Dave Acosta. And for you Elvira fans, there is a photo cover as one of the variants, which is a lovely photo of the great Mistress of the Dark, Elvira. Let's talk about what happened in the previous issue, which is issue number 1. Elvira is going about her daily business, and she is approached by the ghost of H.P. Lovecraft, who has a famous past, but also personally a troubled past due to, shall we say, unconventional opinions about race. Let's put it that way, just putting it nicely. He's been sent back to the land of the living by the Elder Gods because somebody is trying to get their hands on the Necronomicon, and if they do, it means the end of all of existence and reality and etc., etc., etc. So they head out and they look for what they believe is a copy of the Necronomicon in a antiquities museum. Turns out to be fake, but before they can figure out what to do next, they are accosted by 3 gentlemen in robes who are basically middle-aged men, loser types. But it turns out they are part of a cult that is in service to the great god Nyarlathotep. Hopefully I'm saying that right. These are tongue twisters. Bear with me. So the sons of Nyarlathotep snatch up the Necronomicon, take it back to their great god, who recognizes it's a fake and says, "You dummies, how dare you, woo, 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 woo." 3 Stooges slaps all the way around and says, "You got to keep finding it until you bring me that book, because I have to do my thing and end all of reality." Now we pick up in the second issue. Picking up on a lead that they got from the first issue, Elvira hops on a plane with H.P. Lovecraft, safely tucked away inside of a book, although he's not particularly comfortable about it. They get to Mistkatonic University in Arkham, Massachusetts, which is an old stomping ground and a very common locale within the H.P. Lovecraft stories. They head to the university library. They meet a kind of a strange-ish pair of librarians who agree to take them to the Necronomicon once they recognize that Elvira and H.P. Lovecraft aren't some kind of weird, wacko cosplayers and are actually the real deal. They head down to the Necronomicon, and in the course of talking with them, Lovecraft's bells start going off about the senior librarian whose name he starts to recognize and some of the associations he starts to recognize. Particularly when he asks, "What's your maiden name?" She says her name is Whately, which is her maiden name. And if you are familiar with the name Whately, that is the surname or given name of Wilbur Whately from the Dunwich Horror, which is not a good thing, obviously. So before they can take the book and skedaddle and say their incantation to elicit the spell that will stop whatever reality-ending problem is coming, the librarian, Whately, turns into the monster or the demon from the Dunwich Horror, snatches up Elvira and takes her to the famous altar in which she was going to sacrifice whatever person they needed to sacrifice to initiate the return of Yog-Sothoth, which is what happens in the Dunwich Horror. Apparently, the ancestor of the original Wilbur Whately is trying to reproduce his original plan, and the librarian, in the course of her travels, trying to reproduce her great-great-grandfather's actions, has now transformed into this sort of flying, mutated witch demon kind of person, and now is going to sacrifice Elvira. But She needs H.P. Lovecraft to say the incantation. However, H.P. Lovecraft looks at the book, reads through it, and says, oopsie doopsie, this is also a fake. It's an older fake, but it's still a fake, not the right one. I can't say the spell because this book won't work. And they all agree that when the sons of Nyarlathotep show up again to try and steal the Necronomicon, they say, oh no, big bad guys, please don't kill us. And they give them the book, and off they go. And the guys are like, maybe this is too easy. And they say, well, don't look a gift horse in the mouth. We're out of here. And so the librarian returns back to normal, but maybe now has a very awkward and uncomfortable work situation with her peers because now they know who they are. And H.P. Lovecraft and Elvira now scheme to go to their next locale, which is to meet an old friend who H.P. believes might know where the real Necronomicon is. And that friend is a gentleman by the name of October Grendel. And we'll see what other stories of Lovecraft lore pop up in the next issue. So that's where we ended. Kind of a repeat of the first issue in terms of theme and overall plot structure, but lots of in-jokes. As you can expect, every time David writes an Elvira story, there's all kinds of puns, double entendres, sexual insinuations, all kinds of weird, funny, punny type of humor, and looking at the source material and then create a little bit of a satirical bent on it, which is exactly the theme, and you know what you expect when you're going in, and that's what you get here. So what do we like about Elvira meets H.P. Lovecraft #2 from Dynamite Comics? If you like that punny humor, if you like Elvira as a person and a character and the type of comedic horror vibe that comes with it, this is right perfectly smack dab bullseye in the middle of that wheelhouse. If Elvira is your thing, this comic is your thing. Doubly so if you're a Lovecraft fan. If you're a Lovecraft fan, this is right in your wheelhouse. It's right smack dab middle in the bullseye of those two things mashed up together. It's a really good fit. And especially if you like the individual stories and the Easter eggs that come from the Lovecraft stories. In this case, they borrow very heavily from the Dunwich horror. If you like having stories that kind of lean into those Easter eggs and the little references, you're in great shape. So overall, this was a fun, entertaining, lighthearted. Admittedly, the level of serious tension and actual threat of danger really isn't there. It's sort of implied, or at least they're playing along. The situation's dangerous, but it never really works out that way because nobody's going to get hurt. But at least everybody plays their part. It's sort of like a skit or a play, and it's perfectly fine and perfectly entertaining, perfectly amusing. The comic knows what it's trying to be, and it hits the nail on the head for what it's trying to accomplish, which is perfect. On the downside, what didn't quite work, I think the tone is still a little bit more, I won't say dour, but a little bit more serious and reserved compared to the previous Elvira miniseries. I think the fact of Lovecraft's, how should we say, personal checkered past, especially when it comes to topics of race and racism, still kind of weighs on the humor and the tone. And David Avalone spells it out very clearly, even on the preface page. Known racist, H.P. Lovecraft. Okay, David, we get it. We know he's a racist. Everybody knows he's a racist. We get it. Yes. If it's too much, then everybody would say, well, why are you even writing this at all? It's not too much in the story itself, but you feel like an atmosphere of reservation about trying to have too much fun with Lovecraft because he sort of doesn't deserve it, is the tone that comes across. And that's a little bit of a downer because the overall banter and the wittiness that you would normally see between, for example, previously Elvira with Vincent Price, that was super fun. You don't get as much of that here. It's sort of more like HP is very sort of reserved and dour and grim, which sort of matches his personality, but that kind of kills the mood a little bit, if you know what I mean. So you don't get as much of the humor and the lightness and the upbeat energy in this issue and so far in this series as you would in the previous Elvira series. And that just may be just the nature of the beast. But if you're looking for something that's more peppy and fun like the previous arcs, you're not going to get that as much here, which I think is a little bit of a downer. Let's talk about the art from Cooper Bell and Walter Pereira, and letters by Taylor Esposito. Looks great. Elvira looks like Elvira. H.P. Lovecraft looks like H.P. Lovecraft. But the key is, how well do they pull off the Dunwich horror monsters, how well do they pull off Nyarlathotep, and some of the other, how should we say, esoteric looking monsters that come from Lovecraft lore, actually pretty darn good. We've seen a lot of Lovecraft monsters lately, especially on the Zenescope titles, because they've had a big, long stretch of doing Lovecraft adaptations, or at least putting their characters in Lovecraft situations. The monsters here look better, and that's a compliment as best as we can give it, because the monsters here look weird and distorted and mutated, but somehow unearthly in a very strange sort of way, but in exactly the way it should be, because that's what Lovecraft kind of envisioned when he told the stories. He wanted things that felt otherworldly, that felt like they didn't belong in a natural physical world composed of symmetry and beauty and nature. He wanted something that felt really alien and off-putting just in its visual appearance, and you definitely get that here. So thumbs up to the art team. Final thoughts. Elvira meets H.P. Lovecraft. Number 2, what do we think? What's the final verdict? Great pacing, great action. If you like the Elvira style combination of horror but from a humorous point of view, this absolutely hits the nail on the head. Plus, if you're a Lovecraft fan and you like those Easter eggs and references, you get plenty of them here. On the downside, the tone is still a little bit reserved, not quite dour, but just a little bit reserved, which sort of matches Lovecraft's personality, but at the same time, you don't get that peppy fun that you might be used to from the Elvira comics. So overall, we're going to give Elvira H.P. meets H.P. Lovecraft number 2 from the Dynamite Comics. We're still going to give it a 9 out of 10 because it deserves it. It's a good comic. It looks good. It reads well. It's fun. And that's exactly what you were looking for. But let us know what you think. Are you a Lovecraft fan? Or are you a Lovecraft fan for the work and separating the art from the artist, or what's your story there? Are you an Elvira fan, and what do you think, and how do you like these comic series from Dynamite? Let us know in the comment section. Otherwise, please stay tuned through the outro.